Welcome to Visual Skill Modelling. This is part 4 of the Revell Boot Scale 1:144 build. In part 3 I started off making the tower. I'm going to carry on with the tower, putting in the weapons, and we'll see how far we get on. Well, it's onto the gun assembly, and this is 302 silk black. So to make up the gun mount, there's very tiny parts going on. This very tiny disc, this little wheel thing, so I'll just let that dry for a bit of the next part on. And the hinge bracket that holds the gun goes on top here. It's fairly small. So the gun mount now, again, it's a very small part. You have the option of this part being laying down or standing up. I think I'll have it standing up, and the actual mount will go on here. And we'll have a look off camera and see whether it's better to put this on now, then attach the gun, or attach the gun, then put it on. Well, that's gone in. Let's have a look. So I'm just going to attach the gun. Two little location pins there. They go into the bracket here. Put a bit of cement there, a little bit there. And that's the gun fitted. That was a lot better. Once it's dry, I'll do some little touch-ups on the paint, particularly on the gun. I'll keep it black. I want to put the guardrails on. The thing to note with these is there's a lot of waste sprue on here, so you're going to have to carefully cut these off. So this is quite difficult to fit. I've tried to fit it a couple of times. It's going to be tricky. Put the arm in first. It goes just at the side here, just up there. Then sort of hold that in position. Then lever up the rail. And each location point, to try and line them up, it goes at a slight angle. And for the second half, it's much the same again, but you've got the first part to line up. I've assumed that V is meant to happen there. Let's have a look down the line, see if that V is meant to be there. I'm not sure it is meant to be like that. So I think it's meant to be closed. So I'll close. So I'm glad I checked that. So when you're doing this, just make sure the handrail does meet in the middle. But you're going to have to manoeuvre it in very gently. So here we go. Obviously I'll need to touch up some paint. So next I'm painting this, which is the flagpole, and this is 82 dark earth. And the colour that's going around it is 79 blue grey, or greyish blue. So now this is the mast that's going on here, but there's a decal that's got to go on first. That's the little flag. Now, I generally hate putting these on, but I'm going to give it a go. So I've softened it up with some water. I'm just getting it off the paper about midway point. So it's actually better to lay the decal down on a towel, piece of kitchen towel, then gently fold it over and try and marry it up with the other half. It's very difficult to do. Also, these decals can break quite easily, so you have to be extremely careful while doing it. And since I've got the solution out, I'll put the decals on the main tower. There's only two going on here, one for each side, and that's all the decals for the actual sub in its entirety. So that's the decals on and the main assembly actually done. So it's turned out quite good, I think. Building up the main gun now. Very small parts here, but it's very similar to the one on the main turret. Like the other gun, these are quite small parts. The camera doesn't really do it justice how small it is. However, the build itself is relatively simple. You should put the cradle onto the gun itself first of all, before you go into the secondary part. Use minimum amount of cement to do this, because one, you don't want it to be interfering with the gun movement if you want to have the gun actually moving. And of course, because they're so small, it would have a tendency to ruin the moulding of the plastic, which often modelers don't talk about, but it's essential that you only use tiny amounts of cement, particularly on constructions this small. Once the cradle is built, it's just a simple case of placing it onto the gun. So you put the cradle on first, that sits just underneath the gun, and then the cradle mount, which I'm putting on now, do that in 2 halves, fit that on the gun in separate halves. You'll find it easier to do it that way. And lastly, the actual connecting bracket thing here, that can go on right at the end, and that's a simple fit. The gun itself is painted in 57 grey by Revell aquacolor. Unlike the gun on the tower, which was painted in the black colour. I don't know why the 2 different colours. I was tempted to paint it in the same colour, but I decided to follow the instructions. Some of the pictures I looked at did have it in the grey colour anyway. In the end, that's why I decided to keep it as the instructions suggested. But remember, there's no hard and fast rule for this. But that's it done anyway. The last main part to go in the tower is the collar that runs around the command position. This is just like a bordering piece of ML. So it fits right in the edge of the tower position. You may have to hold this for a few minutes because of the nature of it. I just tend to spring back a bit. So just be aware of your positioning of it before you put it on. The decal's now dried on the flagpole, so it's time to place that on. It goes on the centre beam of the railings there. It's just a simple case of a little bit of cement to attach it. Obviously, it goes without saying, be careful handling the decal like this, because they are still fragile, even though it's dry. The mould is meant to have some sort of bracket to hold the pole. Mine didn't have it on it. Now, I either cut it off by accident or it wasn't there. But after studying it, I think the mould wasn't there because there was no actual cut marks where my knife or sprue cutter was. But anyway, it still fits in quite nicely. And just one last thing to do to the tower before I place it on. I'm going to add the withering effects now, as you can see. And again, it's just very lightly, and I'm using for this one Tamiya's Withering Master Snow Suit and Rust B, and I'm using the rust component here just to add the rust effects around the tower. You can go as heavy as you like here, or as little as you want. It depends on the overall look, obviously, of the model that you're going for. I'm going for a sort of medium rusted look. Remember, these subs were hard working in their time. They didn't have time for repairs and new paint jobs. So I think a medium weathering effect is probably sufficient enough for a sub of this type. Now it's time to put in the gun and the tower. So I'm placing the gun in first, just because it's smaller and it will be easier. As you can see, that just fits directly into the hole. The sub 2 masts go into the corresponding holes. If it doesn't look like it's not going to fit, you can either snip off one of the masts at the bottom or just lever the actual shaft into place. It all depends on how well you fitted the actual mast itself. If you are slightly off, it will bend into the actual hole itself. if you're careful not to snap it. But this could also lift up one of the tower components, so just be wary of that. But there's no shame in snipping one of them off so it fits. After all, you're not going to see it anyway. So it's time to fit the remaining parts onto the deck. So first of all, it's these side stabilizers. Dry fit these first is essential. The location points for them are not exactly clear where you have to put them. So if you dry fit them first to know how it conforms to the leading edge of the deck. It does fit quite well, but you need to know where it goes. Next, I'm painting 2 wooden poles that go on the deck, and these are painted in Revell Aquacolor 82 Dark Earth. What they're for, I'm not sure. I would imagine they're similar to a barge pole, but they're just 2 lengths of the pole that are painted wood. So I'm now painting on some of the main structures on the deck. These upright parts here, there's 3 in total. There's a smaller, tiny one that goes in the middle. I'd recommend fitting that one first, and then the 2 main ones. They sort of look like a tripod. There's 3 prongs coming down from each one, and they fit in the actual holes that I drilled near the beginning of the build, if you've watched that video. Now, when I fitted these, initially I thought that the 2 structures came together to form a sort of pyramid-like shape, but that was wrong. I didn't realise it until later on, but luckily the part hadn't set yet, so I still had time to adjust, which I'll show you in a few minutes how I did that. Next to go on are the 2 wood poles that I painted, one on each side of the command tower. The location points are easy to figure out on these. And now for the railings to go on. There's 4 in total. There's 2 small ones that go just underneath where the gun tower is. Again, they just fit into the location points. The location points are quite small to define, obviously with the scale of the model, but they are there. If you just study it, you should be able to find them. Okay. And then it was the larger railing, as you can see I'm putting on there. Self-explanatory, these. Again, the location points are similar to the smaller ones. You have to look at them. But once you find the leading edge one, it just falls into place. And they were really easy to put on in the end. So if I just tilt up the model, you can see them there, the railings on. They're quite effective, I think. Next to go on, there's just a couple of little capstans and some crossbar thing. I have no idea what it is for, but they just go sitting on the middle of the deck at the bow. For the bow construction, the brackets and ornaments on there, there's 2 V-shaped sort of brackets, a larger one and a smaller one. The larger one goes towards the tower, the smaller one towards the bow. When you fit these, make sure they're not completely set before you fit the next part, because you may have to move them in position, because then there's a cross beam that goes over the top and it angles upwards and slants down back towards the deck again, and it sits on the 2 brackets, so you may have to move the brackets underneath that just to get it into the proper position. Well, this will bring part 4 to an end. Everything is on the ship now from the kit. In part 5 I'll be finishing off the model entirely. If you haven't done so already, why don't you check out the channel for the other parts to this build, or indeed the rest of my content. If you subscribe to the channel, you'll be notified of any future updates and new builds. Hit that like button and of course leave a comment. But for now, thank you all very much for watching. Bye bye.